Serial killers are the ones who murder 3 or more people in different periods of time, mostly because of abnormal psychological gratifications, which might include sexual assaults on the victims. So that today, we're going to talk about a mind-blowing story of one of the most notorious serial killers, who was specialized in kidnapping, raping, and murdering young women. Theodore Robert Bundy. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications. Theodore Robert Bundy, known as Ted Bundy, was born in Burlington, Vermont, USA on November 24, 1946. During the first 3 years of his childhood, he lived with his grandparents in Philadelphia, who raised him as their adopted son to hide the fact that he was an illegitimate child and to cover their daughter's mistake. As a young boy, Ted grew up believing a lie, that his grandparents were his parents as he was told, and his mother was considered as his older sister. But later, he discovered the truth when his cousin's girlfriend called him a bastard and showed him a copy of his birth certificate, which listed his father as unknown. He also figured out the truth about his sister, who turned out to be his mother. As a child, Ted Bundy roamed the neighborhood looking in trashes for naked women pictures. He also pursued detective magazines and crime novels. He was addicted to crime documentaries of sexual violence too. These things helped in creating one of the most notorious serial killers. But, unlike the usual serial killers, Ted Bundy was well educated. In 1965, he graduated high school and went to university, and with time, he figured out that he wasn't interested in the subject. Soon after it, he dropped out. After a period of time, he re-enrolled himself at the University of Washington as a psychology major and graduated with an honor degree in 1972. When graduated, Ted Bundy worked in several jobs, including Department of Emergency Services of Suicide Prevention Hotline Center. Also, he worked as the assistant director on the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisor, and his job was to advise women on how to prevent being raped. As a 14-year-old teenager, it was believed that Ted Bundy kidnapped and killed an 8-year-old girl, but Ted always denied it. Also, there was no evidence to prove the allegations. The real proof of assaulting and beating started in 1974, at the age of 27, when he beat and sexually abused an 18-year-old college student girl in her basement apartment, using a metal rod from her bed frame causing internal injuries. This assault caused her a 10-day coma with permanent physical and mental disabilities. The thing that encouraged Bundy to commit his first confirmed murder. Linda Ann Haley was a student at the University of Washington. One day, Ted knocked her unconscious, then carried her and drove away in his car, disappearing forever. After these 2 crimes, it seemed that he found his passion in murdering young women, notably students, so that he developed a technique to approach his victims to gain their trust and sympathy by giving them a feeling that he was not a threat, then lured them into his trap using his flirting skills, while wearing his arm in a sling, appearing unable to load things in his car, asking for help in carrying a load to his Volkswagen Beetle. Then he would bludgeon them unconscious, untie them. After that, sexually assault them before killing and burying them in different sites in the woods. He would also revisit the victims' decaying corpses to have sex with them, and sometimes kept some of his victims' heads as a trophy. As stated earlier, the first murder planted an extraordinary urge in Ted Bundy to continue murdering young college girls. Their disappearances made the police investigate them and enlist different government agencies to help look for the missing girls. Ted was a boogeyman who left no evidence behind the murders. Investigators knew that there was a man seen many times with some girls who disappeared. One time, a group of girls were asked by Ted for help. He introduced himself as Ted and asked for help to load a sailboat in his car. Only one among the 5 girls accepted to help. She followed him to his car, but fortunately, she ran away when she found out that there was no sailboat. Later, the man was described as a handsome, good-looking guy with one arm in a sling, who was always seeking help from girls to load things in his Volkswagen Beetle car. So that Ted was an easy prey for the police to catch, because they were looking for a man with a sling arm driving a Volkswagen Beetle. The news of an abductor came to spread, and among all people, young women became the most scared to talk to strangers. And no one knew anything about what happened to the girls who disappeared, because the bodies haven't been found yet. As the manhunt continued, more witnesses produced the descriptions that matched Ted Bundy and his car too. After that, some victims' bones were discovered scattered randomly in the woods, and Ted's sketch was all over the newspaper and TV shows. But unfortunately, in August 1974, Ted was accepted to law school in Utah and moved to Salt Lake City. 1 month after his move-in, abductions, disappearances, and murders began to occur more frequently. The media reported all the disappearances, and Ted's sketch was recognized by his ex-girlfriend Elizabeth. She was aware about his relocation and the murders that happened there. She gathered the pieces together and called the police for the second time, and reaffirmed her suspicions that Ted Bundy was the murderer of the young woman. For her, the sketch looked very much similar to Ted Bundy. By 1975, the number of victims increased, yet some corpses were never discovered, and Ted Bundy's name was at the top of the suspects list, but due to the fact that not enough evidences were available, it was hard to connect the murders between Utah, Colorado, and the Pacific Midwest. In August of the same year, though, while driving through Salt City suburb, Ted noticed a police car patrol, and out of fear, he sped up. Eventually, he was pulled over. As the officer was searching the vehicle, he found a quite interesting collection of suspicious items, such as masks, handcuffs, a crowbar, rope, and trash bags. These items are surely a serial killer's belonging. So, the police thought they might be dealing with a dangerous criminal, who surprisingly matched Ted's sketch. Thereby, they started searching his house, but they didn't find enough evidence to detain him, which resulted in releasing him. But because he was at the top of their suspect list, they put him under 24-hour surveillance. Ted Bundy later said that the police missed to find Polaroid photographs of his dead victims, which he immediately destroyed after his release. Fortunately, Bundy's Beetle car, which he had sold to a teenager, was found by the investigators, and it was searched. In the end, they found hair samples that matched 3 female victims. Therefore, the police brought Ted to the station and was identified by one of the women, whom he had attempted to kidnap before. Sadly, he was only charged with aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault, to which his parents paid a $15,000 bail and freed him. Still, he remained under surveillance. A couple of weeks later, the investigators were finally able to link the stories between Utah, Colorado, and Washington, with enough evidences that they were convinced they have a serial killer in their hands. However, at first they were only able to convict him for kidnapping and assault, but never murdering. Thus, he was sentenced to 15 years in Utah State Prison. But cunningly, Ted Bundy chose to defend and present himself, so as to have access to the courthouse law library. Indeed, he managed to escape by jumping from the library's second-floor window, and disappeared before the guards returned to check on him. Nonetheless, he only lasted for 6 days, before they got him again and put him in jail. This, though, didn't stop Ted from planning for the second escape. After 6 months, he geniusly studied the prison map and traded with another inmate. Then he was able to get a hacksaw. On December 13, 1977, Ted Bundy piled books and files in his place, covered with his blankets. He then climbed and broke the ceiling into the apartment of the chief jailer, changed his clothes, and walked out of jail, driving from Chicago to Atlanta, then Florida using stolen cars. On January 15, 1978, 2 weeks after the escape, Ted Bundy was still obsessed with murdering and assault. He walked to Florida State University at night, bludgeoned and assaulted 3 sleeping young girls within 15 minutes. Then he broke into an apartment and beat another girl so badly. Now, Ted Bundy was on the run, but as usual, his reckless driving drew to him the attention of a police officer, who searched the car and found 3 IDs of dead women, And that was the end of Ted Bundy. Although, the policeman wasn't aware that he was carrying one of the most wanted fugitives of the USA. While on the road to the police station, Bundy stated to the policeman, "I wish you had killed me." Ted Bundy was a notorious rapist and murderer who confessed to killing 36 women, but the authorities believed that he killed more than 100 women in different states of America in the period of the 1970s. During his trial, he chose to defend himself, but he was sentenced to be executed in the electric chair, and his life was ended on January 24, 1989, aged 24 years old. His last words were, "I'd like you to give my love to family and friends." Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss more videos and much more interesting stories.